Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. It's a really wonderful privilege to be here today. And I had to travel overnight from Sweden, but I really feel empowered. And so thank you very much, Sanjam, and your colleagues for inviting me for the first time to speak to the conference, this very distinguished initiative. I work at the World Maritime University, which is a very special place in the maritime community. It's a capacity building university in Sweden, and we're very proud that Sanjam is in our executive board and contributes enormously to the work program of our university. Believe it or not, I've spent the last 20-odd years working on another initiative at the United Nations, which is this new international treaty on marine biodiversity. And that has a very significant gender component. So I'd like to speak about that. But firstly, I'd like to speak about a research program on gender empowerment that we've undertaken at the university over the past 5 years. The program was funded by DFO Canada. It has a PhD element and a postdoctoral element. And it was to look at the ocean science community in particular, and it was to deliver an action plan and strategy for the empowerment of women. In addition to that, we were to lobby and advocate for empowerment provisions in the BBNJ agreement, this new marine biodiversity agreement. One of the PhD scholars, Dr. Ellen Johansson, was embedded in the International Council for the Exploration of the Seas, ICES. It's one of the oldest intergovernmental bodies on ocean science. And for her PhD, she studied empowerment within ICES. And what you can see from some of her findings is exactly the same messaging that we've heard in the room this morning. So for instance, if you look at the pyramid, this is the gender profile of ICES. At the bottom layer of the pyramid, you can see that there is good equality and conference participation. But as you move up through the organization, it is essentially a male-profiled organization. Intergovernmental body with 19 member states, mainly North Atlantic states. In addition to that, the qualitative data, and you can read for yourself, is pretty deploring for an intergovernmental body. And I think the messaging there resonates very much with what I've heard here today. Now, one of the issues that we decided very early on in the program is that we would focus on solutions. One of the solutions we looked to is the issue of quotas in terms of equality standards for women within organizations. And we had a particular interest in Kenya, a developing country with a very avant-garde constitution in relation to equality. And Dr. Ramesh Ojwala started gender empowerment in the science educational institutes in Kenya. And despite, shall we say, having equality provisions in the law in Kenya, what her findings were very, very similar to what we've heard here today. That policies were outdated, enrollment of female students was lower, women staff were underrepresented and mainly in junior academic positions, and that there was a dominant ethnic groups at play as well. So it wasn't just the gender biases that were at play in the organizations dealing with marine science in Kenya. And of course, the career progression was very different. And I think that was a common theme that I've heard in every single session today. It's a two-track world for women in maritime and indeed for women in ocean science. Now, the good news is we worked very actively at the United Nations to put in very specific gender provisions in the new Marine Biodiversity Agreement. And I'm very happy to say that this is the first law of the Sea Treaty to use gender-sensitive language. An example of that is it no longer refers to the common heritage of mankind, it refers to the common heritage of humankind. But more specifically, it has requirements, and these are legally binding requirements of gender balance, particularly in these powerful committees such as the Compliance Committee or the Finance Committee. In addition to that, all capacity building undertaken under this convention will have to be gender responsive. We have produced an action plan and strategy, and dare I say it, everything in our strategy is what I've heard this morning. The big issues are the 5 thematic areas, the area of women in power, women in leadership, organizational culture. I think that's a key issue. You know, I heard it this morning, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And the issues there are dealing with issues, for example, of the gender pay gap, monitoring and reporting, and of course, professional development, communication and advocacy. And this is why you have to be congratulated. And I know I'm speaking to an online audience, including many of my colleagues in Sweden. It has to become a global movement, and it's quite fitting that we just had this video previously. And I say that, of course, as a partner and indeed a son, and should I say a father of a very beautiful daughter pursuing a wonderful career in medicine. What are the actions? And I think gender has to pervade all initiatives in the workplace. And in terms of the specific actions, I think individual actions should be focused around advocacy, awareness raising, participation. We're seeing it here in the room today, as well as supporting pathways to empower women and to remove barriers to gender equality. Secondly, industry institutional actions. Data. I just cannot overemphasize the importance of knowing the numbers. If you can't measure it, you can't act upon it. In addition to that, industry has to implement gender responsive policies, and you have to focus on measurable outcomes. Perhaps most crucial of all is at the international level. We need particular initiatives by governments and intergovernmental bodies. And I've cited an example for you in the context of the BBNJ agreement. But certainly I know within this room there are delegates attending intergovernmental bodies, and these provisions can be replicated in all international treaties dealing with maritime and ocean affairs. Some good news, as a result of a number of initiatives, including our program at the university, the World Ocean Assessment, it's an assessment which is undertaken by 600 scientists. It's published every 5 years, and for the first time, it's published by Cambridge University Press and the United Nations. For the first time ever, the next rendition of the report will have a specific chapter on gender, and that chapter is being led by our colleagues at the university, Dr. Maria Amalia Rodriguez-Chavez, as well as the 2 PhD scholars that have recently granted from our program. What would I say in conclusion? I think it's life-affirming what I've heard here today, and we're living in very auspicious times. I think, you know, the leitmotif for the conference, sailing to equality, I think we can all agree this is going to be a lifelong voyage. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much for your speech. Sanjam is coming to give you a speaker gift. While we're waiting for that, We've had virtual participants with us from all over the world today. From Madagascar, different parts of the African coast, Latin America, all over the world. And I think that's such a great way of enabling people, regardless if they are here or there on a ship, in their office or at home, regardless of time zones, to be able to actually take part of this experience and this conference with us.